Hello and welcome to another episode of Tommy's Trains. Today I've got a Lionel CW-80. It's an 80-watt transformer, and it's a transformer that came out with most of the trains in the early 2000s before they came out with this Power Max, which is considerably lighter. And this one is only, I think it's 40 watts, 60 hertz, 30 watts. So it's not even half. It's quite a bit lighter. The controls are basically the same, but it doesn't have the accessory terminals, and it's not that great. A lot of people don't like these CW-80s, but I haven't really had any trouble with it other than this one. Now that it's got some age on it, the fan is starting to make some noises. So today we're going to see if we fix that, and I'll show you how we do this. The first thing we need to do is put this somewhere solid, and then you're going to need a special screwdriver to get in there. And I'll put the part number of the screwdriver up so you can see what you need, because they have these tamper-proof screws in here, which you got to get into. You may be able to get a bigger screwdriver than this one. I know this one is kind of small, and it feels like they put these on with a torque wrench. It's been a little bit of a struggle just to get them loosened up, but there's 4 screws in here, so you need to get those out. Once you get those loosened up, you should be able to remove this cowling. And you may have to work it a little bit. The screws, they might still be sticking, and so you gotta make sure it's loose. And this is all plastic, so be super careful taking it apart. It's definitely not a fun experience if you have carpal tunnel or anything. So when you get this opened up, you'll see the circuit board, you'll see a fan right here. Here's your cord. So we can move that over here just to get it out of our way. But you don't want to unhook all this. There's some heat shrink here with some connectors in it. But what we're going to focus on is this fan right here, which we need to get out. There's a fan. You can see it in behind, right down there. So we need to get that out. So you've got a little PC board down in here, and then the fan is here. And the only way that's going to come out is you have to take out these 2 Phillips screws first and remove this PC board. I don't recommend you do this with your feet touching a carpet or anything staticky. With these PC boards, a little bit of static can wreck it, so we don't want that. We don't want any stray voltage. PC board, what this does is this is your direction, your whistle, and your bell, and they're all connected to this. Also, your throttle is connected to it, and then out of that goes obviously your terminals. Unplug this connector from the PC board. So you've got a potentiometer here, and what that does is it increases the voltage. So in order to get this second screw out that's buried underneath this, we have to get this potentiometer off. So if you just pry up underneath carefully, there's a way to get this handle off. And when you look inside, there's the shaft coming out of the potentiometer here that connects to this handle. So you should be able to just get in there with a knife or a screwdriver and carefully pry that off. So once you get this off, there's a nut on here that you just loosen up, and then the whole thing will come off. So we have a nut, a washer, but this has to come out in order to get to that second screw. So we've disconnected it from the PC board, and this is the potentiometer for the throttle that connects onto this. And then once you've done that, you can expose this screw and get to it, because this whole PC board has to come out. So carefully take that out. And then once you get that unhooked, this whole thing will slide out like this, okay? And then your fan is here, so you don't have a lot of room to work with. Here's your green LED for your light. Some of these fans will just plug in, like this one does. At least 2, it looks like 4 more Phillips screws to get out to get the fan off. So we need to remove those. And there's little nuts on them, so carefully don't lose that. Maybe behoove of you, if you're doing a lot of these, to get a little set like this, little telecommunications tools. This is for working on computers and such. And it has some microscopic little Phillips screws in it, or Phillips screwdrivers that go into your driver. So it was just 2 little bolts that were holding this on. These top 2 went to something else. So then we're going to have to get this fan out, and this one looks like it's directly soldered in, so we'll have to improvise. Alright, so I have my soldering iron warming up. I use a Weller. You want one for electronics with a small tip. You don't want some big gummy thing that you use for pipes. And the same thing is with your solder. You need, I like this rosin core solder. It's flux core solder because it has the flux in it. But if not, you can get the flux. And what the flux does is it makes the solder stick to the iron. So now that I've separated my wires here, I want to go ahead and strip those off a little bit. And unfortunately, this one didn't have a connector on it, but my new one does. So I'll have to sacrifice the connector, which obviously I hate doing, but it's what has to be done. And I'm going to cut this back a little bit and save this connector for a rainy day. I'll just take some of this, strip it off a little bit, about somewhere between 3/8 and a ½ inch is plenty. Same thing on this side. So if I was going to desolder this from this board, which this is a printed board, means it goes through the factory, computerized, and it just prints all these components on it, which is the new way it's done, the old school ways where you had to solder everything on by hand. So to unsolder this little thing right here, I'd need a heat sink, and I probably still would have some issues with it. So this is where we're at. So red to red, black to black, that makes it pretty simple. First thing I'll do is the easy part, and I'll tin these two sides. So you need to have some sort of a sponge. So you want to tin your soldering iron, and then I probably have to go get my vise because I don't want cold solder joints. So this is a mini pan of vise. What I'm going to do with this is have both of my leads so that I can put solder on to tin these. So this will hold my wires for me. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the heat underneath. You'll put the solder over the top until it flows in. And what you want is nice, clean, shiny solder connections here. Otherwise, you get what they call the cold solder joint, which is, it looks kind of dull like this. You want it shiny. So put the heat to it and let the solder flow into it. And we don't want to keep the heat on too long, or we'll start melting the jacket back here. So that looks pretty good. And then what the sponge does is it lets us clean our iron off. So now we have to do the same thing with this, which would be a little bit harder. But I probably don't need a vise for that. It's already kind of holding itself. In the military, we used to have to solder everything. Now everything is just plug and play. We'll let that cool off for a second, and now we're going to take our fan. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, because you only have just so many hands. If I had some tiny heat shrink, which I may out in the garage somewhere, but it's a stormy day and I'm not going to go digging for it, so I'll just use some tape. We're going to connect these. There should be enough solder on this tinning to connect these wires. So we're going to hold this up underneath and put these together to join them. The hardest part is having a steady hand. Ideally, you'd have two pan of vices. Because what you got to do is hold this together so the solder flows between, and then remove the heat in such a way that it doesn't leave a cold joint. So once that solder flows, you have to hold it for a second, and then so I have a nice shiny joint there, which is exactly what I wanted. So we don't want high heat or static hitting our circuit board, and the same goes, the fan will probably tolerate it, but the circuit board probably won't. Again, steadiness is the trick, and it's the older you get, the harder it is to be steady. So hold the heat on until you see the solder flow through. Remove the heat without moving your connection, and it should be on there. And reassemble this in the reverse order, and we'll try it out. Probably one of the hardest parts of this whole thing is going to be to get your printed board back in, because there's little buttons on that are also connected to your whistle, your bell, and your direction. The buttons all work. Kill the power. Put our locomotive on the track. The bell and whistle and everything isn't going to work on this train, but they're all back together and working. So thank you for watching another episode of Tommy's Trains, where we fixed this Lionel CW-80 transformer. Hopefully that helps you out, and I will talk to you next time.